Good evening, everybody. This is Pastor Wendell Jones, and thank you for coming back again yet another Monday for our show entitled The Relevant Church. The whole purpose behind this is that we as a church, I really do believe that we need to assume our position in the forefront of our community and deal with relevant topics, things that our community really needs to address, and things that the church needs to find her place in to be a contributor in that. And as we stated on last month when we kicked this off, because we had such great feedback from our discussion centering around mental health, we have decided to dedicate one Monday each month to deal with the topic of mental health. And so today we are going to talk about Black men and mental health. But let me back up a little bit. I hope that you noticed the new theme song. I want to give a shout out to this young man who did a wonderful job for us, Mr. Darius Curse. He is incredibly talented. And so, Darius, thank you for putting that together for me, sir. And we have an outstanding panel. We got a full house today. So I'm expecting this to be pretty spirited, some good insight. These are people that I have a great deal of respect for, representing different generations. So that's a good thing. But we're going to talk about how mental health needs to be an acceptable conversation amongst Black men. So without further ado, I'm going to bring out the entire panel. I'm going to introduce them to you. Some of them are repeat visitors with us, but we want to make sure you know who they are, and then we're going to get this conversation started. So if we can bring everybody up, I want you to see this great panel of wisdom that we have today. And let me tell you who these good people are who mean a lot to me. First, we've got Dr. Dana Ray. Dr. Dana Ray is an internal medicine specialist here in Greenville. He practices at the Cypress Internal Medicine practice here in town. He's a graduate of Wofford College and also MUSC. He's been my friend for 30 years. He's my baby's uncle. I think he answers their text messages quicker than he answers mine, especially Aaliyah's. I think she'll pick him over me. He's an outstanding physician. He's my personal physician as well as my family. So I'm so glad to have Dana. And I give Dana credit for being the person who sparked my interest in becoming an advocate for mental health in our community. Next, we have, back by popular demand, he did such an outstanding job in our inaugural show. That is Mr. Jules Green. Jules is a licensed clinical social worker and the owner of Life Solutions. He is a graduate of New Mexico State. And I think Jules also SC State too, right? Yes, sir. He's SC State as well. If you were on our original show, he kept dropping some wonderful jewels and nuggets for us. And so I'm so grateful that he made time to come back and spend some time with us this Monday. And also I've got this young man that I'm so proud of to have him on the show. He went to school with my kids. He's not waiting until he gets gray hair to become an advocate. He's already out there in support of making sure that this conversation can be normalized. That's Mr. Ramel Brown. Ramel, as I said, is a resident here in Greenville, South Carolina. He is the founder of Mel's Mind. He is a mental health advocate, motivational speaker, and soon to be therapist when he completes his Master's of Social Work up at Johnson C. Smith. And Dana, he's a proud member of our noble clan, Kappa Alpha Psi, so you know he's got to be all right.
Good man. I like him already.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And also, my man, a return visitor with us, Mr. Kenneth Page. Kenneth is an author, a motivational speaker. He's a banker at TD Bank, football coach, a youth teacher at our church. He's doing everything. I think he probably sells out of his trunk too. He's an all-around good kind of guy. I'm so glad to have him on because he is very much so interested in this topic and has a lot to contribute. And last but not least, my right-hand guy, Mr. Jermaine Smith. Jermaine is an elder here at my church. He is my assistant pastor. He's also doing incredibly well over at Michelin. Got some wonderful things going on, and he's dedicated to improving our community. So we've got this wonderful panel tonight. So let's just kick it off and let's get this conversation started. The first question, I'm gonna ask you, Dana, directly, and just go from there. because you and I talked about this subject for several years, and you were instrumental in my life. And so let's just have some transparency here. Me going through a pretty difficult time at one point in time, and you talked to me as my best friend, but also as my doctor, and you convinced me that, listen, I think you might just need a little help. And you ran against all the stuff we're going to talk about tonight. Right. But you talked me into saying, let's just do something to get you through just a little bit. So with saying that, you're normally the first person, you're often the first person that begins to recognize that somebody is in trouble.
Correct.
And so when you're ready to encroach upon that conversation, talk to us about some of the objections, the different objections that you have encountered when you're trying to talk to Black men about the need of some help, the discussion about mental illness. And then secondly, guys, this is for the whole panel. After Dana talks to us a little bit about the objections, I want to open it up to all of y'all. And let's begin to talk about how can we get around those objections so the conversation can be normalized. But Dana, you've talked to a litany of people, including myself. What were some of the objections that you ran into?
Well, I think the barriers that I see, first of all, I'm a primary care physician. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but I'm typically, as a primary care physician, the first line when it comes to dealing with mental health. And I think that the barriers that we as primary care physicians see are multifactorial. So there are a lot of issues that can serve as a barrier between the patient seeking appropriate help. I think the first one would be lack of education and understanding about what mental health really is. Many times, one of the first things that I hear people say when they initiate the conversation, or if I initiate the conversation, is they make a comment of, am I crazy? Or do you think I'm crazy? So there's always that stigma associated with mental health. And that provides a huge barrier between the patient and myself and the patient seeking adequate or getting adequate treatment. So when we talk about stigma, that is probably the biggest hindrance that we see in the African American community when it comes to healthcare treatment, and especially among Black men. I was reading an article by the National Alliance of Mental Illness, and they cited a study that said approximately 63% of African Americans believe that depression, and specifically mental health as a whole, but specifically depression, is a sign of weakness. So, as Black men, we can never be viewed by family members or anyone else as weakness. This is something that we should control. This is something that we can fix ourselves, because that's what we do. We fix things, and we cannot show signs of weakness. So the lack of education, or as far as the understanding about mental health, this social stigma associated with it, whether it's valid or perceived, is a barrier. And the other thing that I see a great deal is provider bias, where we all know that in healthcare, there is a disconnect between the African American community and healthcare. And we understand that those issues are valid and true historically. And that is a big divider between us and patients getting adequate health care. And that's why, as a primary care physician, we see that our roles are very instrumental in bridging that gap and pretty much breaking down that barrier so we can have a healthy dialogue. And that's the only way we'll be able to get these patients help.
Awesome. I see y'all. I see the wheels are turning. So forget my second question. Well, y'all ready to jump in now? I see Ramel and Jules. Y'all got something to say about what was just discussed?
Yeah, I just want to say, from that standpoint of being weak, or feeling like we're crazy, I feel like we need to understand vulnerability. That we have to be vulnerable as African American men. We can't be afraid to be vulnerable in those situations, especially when it's time to seek therapy or we're in therapy. I feel like we have to know that at that position, vulnerability is going to have to put us in a standpoint of expressing who we truly are and what's really going on to get to that bottom, that solution of what's going on.
Well, let me throw out a statistic. I like numbers. I like data. Okay.
Yeah.
Now we, as African Americans, we make up what, 13.4% of the population, United States, roughly 13.5%. 16% of African Americans, through surveys, have a history or have dealt with or are dealing with mental health issues. That's roughly 7 million people. Now, out of 7 million people, African Americans, 1 in 3 actually get treatment.
I saw that today. Yeah, only 1 in 3 of us will actually seek out mental health treatment.
33% out of 7 million people. So this is a prevalent issue. This is something that I deal with, or primary care physicians, we deal with every single day. But oftentimes it is extremely difficult for patients to initiate. Now, and you also have to look as a physician at cultural differences too. And I was reading an article that talked about, and that's something that I see in our practice. Oftentimes you won't have a patient come in and say, I'm depressed. They'll give you other cues. And a lot of times as African Americans, those are physical cues. And the most common physical cue we hear is pain. So this patient may come in and say, oh, I'm having pain here. I'm having pain here. Oh, this hurts. And we do the appropriate workup, and oftentimes we don't find anything. But we also have to remember the cultural differences, whereas some of our other counterparts of different ethnic groups may come in and say, I feel down, I feel withdrawn, I feel disconnected, I'm sad. A lot of times in the African American community, we will complain of those physical cues, and then that should be a reminder to a lot of us as healthcare providers that now we need to open up the door, not just to diagnose and treat those physical issues, but could depression or mental health issues be associated with this person's symptoms?
But does that take some type? And that's wonderful thing, because I had a question about that in there that I want to ask you guys as well about that particular thing, Dana. But is that part of the ongoing training to even be able to recognize that? For a physician to realize that, because I would think, you know, the disconnect there is that how would anybody outside of our culture understand that that's cultural?
Right. Yeah, I think it's part of it is training, and I think a large part of it is experience too. So as a healthcare provider, as I walk in the room, patients don't realize how much information they provide me before they speak their first words. Okay, I'm looking at how they're dressed, their posture, their ability to engage with me immediately as I walk in the door. Do they make eye contact? So those things are taught in training. You know, a lot of times when residency, we have great attendings that in psychiatry who take us through and give us these little pearls of wisdom. And then you get out in practice, and then you start seeing these things in person. So I think it comes with both the training and with your experience. And we have to train these younger physicians that there are cultural differences. Mm-hmm. And we have to be aware that these cultural differences exist, and we have to listen and look for them.
Jules, Kenneth, Jermaine, Ramil hit on something a few minutes ago. Let's go back to that a little bit. This cuss word called vulnerability. What's up with us in that? What is up with us as Black men and our unwillingness to be vulnerable? Where is that coming from?
I think we've reinforced it ourselves.
Talk to us.
I believe that in our community, whether it's through, you know, our social institutions, workplace, so many of our environments reinforce this, you know, invincibility factor that Black men are supposed to have. And what's curious about it is that, you know, yes, we are strong. Yes, we are powerful. But the question begs, how do we validate our power, our strength, while also understanding that vulnerability itself is a strength? And I think it has to really be conditioned during those developmental years. So our young men, our boys can understand, you know what, I feel like crying right now, and this is going to actually make me feel better about a situation. So we have to teach our young men and our boys how to self-validate. And I think within that, we would also be able to teach them that self-care is important and that it's an essential part of the toolkit of being a man, being able to care for oneself and take accountability and responsibility for your wellness. I did want to go back to Dr. Dr. Ray's point about the residents. Having been a social worker and now a therapist, you know, I've spent a lot of time with residents, and they always seem to be very patient-centered, not verbally dominant like a lot of doctors end up being. But I think there's a disconnect between residency to becoming a doctor. Well, they're already a doctor, but completing residency, because I see a shift, and I see them becoming more verbally dominant several years after residency. So I'm not sure if it's a confidence factor that's missing, but I've most of the residents that I've worked with have been very patient-centered and very engaged in active listening to their African American clients, and we've had these discussions. But again, there's a disconnect that happens, post residency, where maybe socially they become conditioned to be more verbally dominant with their Black clients.
Just to jump off of that, that speaking, I feel like from getting out of college and dealing with some of my classmates, I feel like that vulnerability part comes with the foggy uncertainty about where they want to go in life or what's going on in their life, and we have to be in that position to make those changes. And I mean, as us African American men and our social work therapists and handling advocate for mental health.
Well said. Jermaine, KP, were coming up, were y'all encouraged to be vulnerable, to share your feelings, or just to be, we're gonna keep our head down and make it happen?
No, I wasn't.
For me personally, not. Go ahead, KP.
You keep going, man.
Okay.
Well, I wasn't.
KP, go first. Then Jay, I'll let you go behind it.
All right, for me, being raised in that way, it was more so like, when I was about 10, my life went through a drastic change. We found out my dad was addicted to crack. My parents got divorced, so that greatly, it messed up the framework of our life at that time. So now being in a single parent household and my mother having to work all the time, yeah, I'm going through all this stuff. And it's not that she didn't want to not address it, but where really was the time? Because you want to take care of your kids, you want to do that, but these bills still have to be paid. I recognize they built a life around 2 incomes that was now just on her income. And she switched from working the day shift to the night shift because they paid her more money. So it's like we go to school all day and then we come home and we see my mom on the way out. And we don't have a whole lot of time to interact. And, she was loving and caring, but she would always promote this message like, I know you got X, Y, and Z going on. I know this stuff is hard, but you still have to do something with your life. You still have to get somewhere. So even though it wasn't necessarily, ingrained in me, directly in an indirect manner, the focus was on, I know you feel this way, don't let it knock you out. Don't let it kill you. You still got something to do. So then as I grow up and I'm going through life, and then you get responsibilities added on, you get things added on, you're trying to accomplish things and do stuff. We have things to do. And especially as men, Black men, you get out and, your leaders in your family, if you got kids or you're mentorship, trying to advance in your career, there's all these responsibilities and pressures, but there's still this thing of like, hey, I got to get this thing done. I can't let how I feel right now stop me. So you just kind of learn like, hey, well, I learned if I focus on working, this stuff don't bother me until I'm not working. If I focus on doing X, Y, and Z, if I'm always busy, I'm cool. But that moment that I stop and I ain't got nothing to do and I'm sitting with myself, it's like, oh,
comes
snap.
back like a flood.
Yeah. And then to comment on something that Ramel said earlier, we're talking about vulnerability. You know, if you're a man and you're doing stuff and you have people depending on you and things like that, you don't really feel like you have a place where you can show that vulnerability. Because I got to recognize that what I show you in this moment, you're gonna remember this. It's gonna be a stain in your mind if you see me break down in front of you. When you see me tomorrow, are you still going to see Kenneth Page? Or are you going to see this broken individual? Now you don't think I'm capable of doing the things that I once was because you saw me in a moment. And if I can say one more thing, you know, Pastor, I went through my bout of going to therapy. And I remember the first day I went, it was kind of intensive, and we were digging into some things. And we were talking about stuff in my life I never really unearthed it before. And all I really wanted to do was cry. Like, it was so much going on. I just wanted to break down and cry and let everything flood out. And I instinctively stopped talking because I felt the breaking coming. And something in me has always said, hey, when you get to that moment of breaking, you can't do it. You whatever it takes. So I just instinctively shut up. And it was in that moment that I realized I've never felt personally like I've had a space to be vulnerable, a space to open up, a space where I can let down my armor and break down and boo-hoo, cry, snot nose, and all of that, but still retain who I am in your eyes.
Oh man, that's huge, KP. That is huge. I told somebody recently because they asked me the question. It's like, why? Say, you know, why you guys don't show that more often? And my answer was this. I said we feel it. I said, but I think as a majority of us, we feel like the moment I let a tear drop, I won't be able to stop them. You can feel like the pressure sitting behind this dam that if I let one little breach happen, I feel like I'm going to lose absolute control of it. So I'm going to push that thing back down again and just make it happen. Make it happen. Jermaine, I want to come to you. Then we'll come back to you, Jules. Jay, what did you want to say about that subject?
Yeah, basically, when you're looking at that word vulnerability and what KP was talking about and what Ramel was saying as well, a lot of times in our culture, especially as Black men, it wasn't fostered. When you look at everything from our music, especially with me, myself, I know with a lot of us, especially coming up with rap music and everything like that, there's no vulnerability whatsoever. It's about you being the hardest that you possibly can be. And then if you are if you are hearing something about vulnerability within a song or within the culture, is for you to try to manipulate a woman to get something that you want to get. And so I show enough vulnerability to you so that you feel comfortable for allowing me to do what I need to do and move on to the next thing.
That's real.
And so when it comes to just that image and that word in general, I do believe that my parents did their best to allow me to voice who I was, to be vulnerable. But looking at my family structure with a father being in jail, my mom raising two boys, she's married, but she's living outside as a single parent because her husband's in jail. And then my brother dying, then having to deal with that. We talked about certain things, but it wasn't until I got into my early 20s to where we really went back and started asking certain questions of each other. But from 3 years old to 20, there was small conversations going here and there, but I didn't really feel comfortable enough to say, okay, can I really share this with you? Because you never asked me how I felt or be in a vulnerable situation about you being in prison. You always told me, hey, this is a place you don't want to come, but you never asked me how I felt about this or how I felt about that until I got into my 20s where I'm starting to have to make decisions. And I'm trying to figure out why am I thinking like this? And basically to the point where you what KP was saying was that you're dealing with so much until this time when night comes or when the job is done and you've been playing Superman all day and you finally take that cape off, but nobody see all the bruises that you had to take throughout the day. And so I think it's really one of the things that we really have to look at, how we were brought up, how we look at our culture as a whole, especially in the Black community when it comes to men. A lot of things have been fed into us, even in the church.
Yep.
It has been fed into us to, oh, you know, just make it and hold on. You know, God's gonna make a way. I understand that, but I'm trying to figure out where the way is at. Like, gosh, you know, you got to show me the way, but it's been embedded for decades and centuries, and something that we are really, until coming to CYM and for you, Pastor, really talking about it. A lot of these things weren't really even discussed when it came to church or any other arena that we was a part of.
Awesome. Jules, jump in there, bud.
So you guys have said a mouthful already today, and it's awesome. But Elder Smith just mentioned the music, the culture. Those are the reinforcements of the resistance to vulnerability. And I'm also going to add, we can be pretty homophobic in our community. And in the Black community, we associate male vulnerability with homosexuality.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just something we can't get around, but it's holding us back. I have a lot of clients that show up and, let's say they're, approximately age 30. And let's say they haven't had an opportunity to really express their vulnerability. It shows not just in their communication, but I look at their relationships. I assess the quality of their communication with their significant others. And the lack of vulnerability, or the fear that they're going to be observed as, gay or weak, has really stymied their developmental process as, adults or young adults. And so the telltale signs are the relationships, the work performance, the physical health, the mental health. So all of these areas of well-being or wellness are negatively affected by the fear that they're going to be characterized as weak or gay, or incapable. And I love what Mr. Page said about, the personal mandate to resist that willingness to just open up and have that human moment. So in essence, I almost feel like we're these mythical creatures who aren't allowed to have an actual human experience.
Absolutely. It's amazing the expectations that are placed upon our backs, and how we have to present ourselves at all times in society. It makes me think of this quote that I wrote down. I'm sure most of you are familiar with James Baldwin's quote. It said, "To be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a state of rage about all the time." Question: do you, as men, and we are Black men, and so we are living this American experience as a Black man, and we've had some opportunities, and from the outside we look successful, whatever, but we still never been immune to the experience. Do you think that there's this almost this collective PTSD that we experience as Black men in America that is contributing to the need to make mental wellness a top priority for us in our community?
To me, I think we do. Prime example, I can be riding in my car and see the police pull up behind me, and I immediately, everything in me just like freezes up. I ain't did anything wrong. License is good. Plates are fine. I don't have anything in the car, but I'm thinking the whole time, like, man, did I do something? Let me just stay straight. Let me get where I need to get. Are they still following me? And it's all because of what we have experienced, because most of us have been pulled over, maybe once, or, even never, whatever the situation may be. And you always go in your mind, you think about all the stuff that has went on prior to 2020, but just decades of systematic racism that is going on within this country, that all those things start plaguing your mind to where it can make you very paranoid. It'll make you to the point where you're questioning everything that you see when it comes to people. And so I really do feel that we do and as far as black men really do feel that as a whole, because we're really one of the only cultures or groups of people in this country that got to have conversations with our children, with our nieces and nephews and cousins about this is how you should act when an authority figure pulls you over or this or that.
Yes.
A lot of my white counterparts are not having those conversations with their kids or their nephews or nieces or anything. To them, it's foreign. To us, this is everyday life.
Absolutely. Jump in, guys. Dana. We got you muted, Dana. We got to get you unmuted. There we go. Go ahead.
So when we talk about this, these issues, these racial issues, there is a psychological baggage that we carry every day. And oftentimes it's not spoken or discussed unless we are in Black company, right? That's just something that we just don't talk about. I was reading an article that talked about the data points between the different demographics of depression, whether it's race, whether it's or these factors, whether it's unemployment, your household income, lack of insurance. And it was talking about how you see a lot of these variables across the board regardless of race. But one of the things that African-American men and women deal with that other races oftentimes don't is the stress from racism and how that has a negative part to play in our daily psychological process. I give you an example. We saw the snow last night, right? So I have a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old, good kids. My next door neighbors are Hispanic. So my oldest comes into the room while my wife and I are watching TV, and he says, 11:15, he says, "Dad, me and the guys next door, we want to walk around the neighborhood." 11:15 at night. So the first thing, I jump into dad mode and concern. Okay, you can, however, have your phone on. And so there was a list of things that I had to prep him for to safely walk around the neighborhood, to play in the snow. Right. So deal with these issues every day. So that has to be that psychological weight that's added to us that unfortunately other races or other ethnic groups don't deal with.
A neighborhood that you've lived in how long?
20 years. And I'll give you another. Right. So I'll give you another example. 2 Black families live in our neighborhood. We're very close with the other family. The other family they're kind of like our big brother and sister. Their son had just had surgery and is living with them until he can recuperate. And he walks. Part of his rehabilitation, he gets out and walks. There was a message on our neighborhood Facebook page that said, "Heads up, people in the neighborhood. There is a gentleman who is walking in the neighborhood. He's not making eye contact. He's not looking at cars. He looks out of place." So then our neighbor, his parents said, "That is my son. He had surgery. We have lived here for over 20 years. He is not out of place." So those are the things that people outside of our culture oftentimes don't experience, but we deal with it every day. So it has a negative impact on our psyche.
Trauma.
It is this form of PTSD.
I want to jump in for a hot second. So when I was 19, I decided to follow Dr. Sebi. I stopped eating meat, and everything was alkaline and amazing. And like, how you have these new Christians or these new converts to a religion, you become disdainful of everything wrong that everyone else is doing. And I remember during my little campaign, I scapegoated the Black diet as being the sole cause of the poor health outcomes in our community. But in my developmental journey of becoming an actual normal person, I realized that the stress associated with living in this melanated body,
this weaponized skin.
Yes, it's equally as causative than as much as the food. And so I think this is a dialogue that has to be had in Black families. Like, we have to talk about this piece, because this information is missing as it relates to holistic wellness of the Black person in America. I don't think that this part of the conversation is really being had, that the stress associated with being African American, as well as, you know, the cellular history, you know, the tale that our cells are telling, you know, ourselves. I think that's important as well. So in addition to that, I think that, well, I ask you guys this: in your journeys, have you actually felt like you had access to brothers who supported your vulnerability and your individualism in your life experience?
Well, we were fortunate. We somehow found each other.
Right.
It's about a motley crew of about 5 of us, and we ended up in the same frat. But before we got in the same frat, we'd be up in the room with this thing that we call court.
Court. Yeah.
Remember court?
Yes.
We had court. Court was the time when the 5 of us got together, and you check all your stuff at the door. Tell the truth.
Right.
Where you at? Tell the truth that she hurt you. She broke your heart. Tell the truth about whatever it is, and anything could be asked of you.
Right.
And you were supposed to come absolutely clean. And we started out as fun, Dana, but it ended up being incredibly therapeutic. But I think it has lasted. It has bound a 30-year relationship among us, because we know each other's stuff. We know each other's hangups. But we still support each other. I think that's probably the exception, Jewel, because I don't think a lot of people can say that. Dana?
Right, I agree. You know, we played those games and we had court and we kind of joned each other about different things. But the thing that we had that a lot of people don't have is we had a group of brothers that were supportive. You know, if you had seen me in a breakup and I was tearful, I wouldn't have felt ashamed. I felt like you were there to comfort. Even if we did it as a collective or even on an individual level, I felt like I could do that. And I didn't feel less of a man because I cried in front of you. And, you know, I honestly think that, you know, with the life experiences that we've had, we've probably seen each other cry. I mean, we have. But you had the other 4 guys there to pick you up and to prop you up when you were at your weakest and your most vulnerable point. 1 second did you feel less of a person?
So how do we create that sense of community for brothers who may not necessarily go the fraternal route, or have family support, or have the access to a great church? How do we create that sense of community? Because, you know, maybe that's the dialogue here too, that we just simply don't have that sense of community in order to get to those awarenesses.
How do we do it, Ramel?
I mean, I'm gonna say what I would usually do, you know, even in college, you know, seeing like other peers or, you know, other males, especially because we are absolutely right. We frowned upon having these type of conversations that open us up, suppress us. Just reach out, honestly, like I would even bring a friend over and ask him, how is your mental? Like, are you okay? Is there anything that I can do to support you in this time of need? You know, and even if I don't know him at that time, he knows I reached out to him, and it will be, I feel like consciously, he know every time he sees me that he asked, am I okay? How's your mental? Or, you know, what can I do to put myself in a better position that I am in now? You know, like, just, we need to make ourselves feel comfortable with each other instead of, you know, feeling like we're competing with each other to get to the same place that we're going, you know, which is all to succeed in our African American community.
Well said. Brothers, what else? Anybody else? Jay, KP, what are your thoughts? How can we foster more of that, so that what Dana and I just talked about is not the exception but the norm?
I think one thing that could be helpful is, you know, if you're grown, if you're older, and you get a chance to interact with young people, showing a level of vulnerability to them. Now, understand, when you're working with kids and young people, you got to be mindful. Like, I can't just say anything to a 7-year-old. And, you know, you don't want to say something to a kid that might upset their parents. you know, even sometimes before I hang out with kids, I'll say, hey, mom and dad, are you comfortable with me talking about things along this line of subject? Because I want to be honest with them, but I don't want to step on any parental toes. So I think showing a level of vulnerability to them, and then also not being dismissive of the things that young people are going through. What I mean by that is, Dr. Dana, you mentioned earlier a second ago talking about, you know, you go through a situation, you get your heart broken and you're hurting, you want to cry and let it out. Well, I remember when I was young in high school, I get my heart broke, and then you mention to an adult, and they tell you, "Oh, that's not real love. That's puppy love. That don't mean nothing." And
Yeah.
growing up, I understand what you mean by that, but realizing that that 14, 15, 16-year-old, they're literally experiencing heartache. They're experiencing, you know, all the emotions that you go through, the 5 stages of grief and all of that stuff. Kids are going through that. And then you look at me and tell me, oh, it's not that big of a deal. It's not important. So then it's like, I think sometimes as adults, because we recognize the stress of the things that young people are dealing with, and that they're truly not comparable to what adults go through, but they're heavy to them. And I think we got to be mindful of that and not be dismissive of what we think is small in their eyes, but it's actually big to them.
Well said, man. And we older people can be very guilty of that. Jay, did you have something you want to add?
Just basically to piggyback off of KP, because being a youth pastor at CYM and KP being part of my staff, that's conversations that we always have all the time as far as being relatable to our teens and to our youth, and even to our parents, that we don't sugarcoat anything, but we're not going to hide anything. Because that was the rule that I always lived by, especially with youth ministry, that I would tell a parent, I would not know more about your child than you do. So if your child says something off the wall, please believe I'm coming to find you to let you know what's going on, so that we can deal with this as a team, because we're here to help to assist you as well. Because if we say we're a church family, we want to act like we're a family. But the one thing that I like about what KP was saying was that trying to establish what you, Pastor, and Dr. Ray was saying about how y'all had court, and basically building that foundation with your other brothers, is that a lot of times it just takes that one individual, like Ramel said, like that one person going to another individual saying, hey man, what's going on? I kind of saw you today. I don't know what's going on, but something just didn't feel right. If you want to talk about it, hey, I'm always here to talk. I may not have all the answers. I'll try to point you to the person that may have some answers, but I'm here to talk. And normally it just starts with one person taking that first step. And then from there, you never know where it can lead to as far as building that type of community, because I've had people to do that for me. Pastor, most definitely, I was coming to your house at, 16 years old before you got to work, sitting on the porch like, hey, I got to talk to you real quick. And you might have just had
lying, y'all. I'll pull up in the driveway and like, oh God, you ain't here again. God, dog, boy, go home. But that was my little buddy, and he's still with me.
Yeah, and it's just starting from there, because even though my dad was in my life and he's still in my life, I just needed a different voice to basically affirm what my dad had been telling me. I just needed someone that was a little bit closer to my age to be like, hey, this is what you need to do. And then it would click in my head. It was like, you know what? My dad said the same thing, and then go back. And my dad was like, oh yeah, you doing it? I was like, yeah, I just had to talk it out with somebody. And, but that's what we have to do as men within our community. Sometimes, if we're trying to figure out how we're going to build this group, we have to sometimes be that first step to the brother that's close to us, younger or older, and just step out there.
Outstanding. Did you have something, Dana?
Yeah. And another role that we play that is extremely critical is our role as fathers, especially to fathers of Black boys. Jones, with your boys, and I have two. One of the things that can be very helpful in creating a generation of young men who are in tune with their emotions are how we deal with those young men at an early age. You know, I've told my boys early on, it's okay to cry. Just make sure what you're crying for is worth crying over. Okay. You know, you didn't get a donut for breakfast. No, it's not something to cry over. But if you've fallen and you scraped your knee or whatever and you're crying, that's okay. And how we talk and what we say to our young boys as well. I'm sure all of us or many of us have heard terms like "you're a man now," even at a young age, or "when I'm gone, you're the man of the house."
Yes.
6. Okay. So now that young man has to try to mentally navigate, how am I supposed to be a man, and does not have the tools at that age to understand what that means. And that's something that I have been very hesitant to say to my boys at an early age, because they're not men. When that time comes and it's appropriate, I will say that, but I don't want to put that added pressure on them when they're not mentally mature enough to understand what manhood is.
Absolutely, absolutely. I remember I had to fix that at my house because you know, my middle son's nickname used to be, my daughter nicknamed him Man Man.
Mm-hmm.
He's outgrown that now. So Ramel, when you see Wendell, don't call him Man Man. He doesn't like that. But she called him Man Man because she couldn't say little, because I used to say Daddy's little man, and so she couldn't say little, so she named him Man Man. And I had to fix that one day, guys, because I remember I came home from work, and I had traveled for business, and Nita told me, she said, "You need to go talk to your son." I said, "Why?" She said, "Just go talk to your son." And I went back then. I said, "What's going on with you and your mom?" He's like, "Well, she got mad because I told her when you was gone, I was the man." And I was trying to tell her what to do. I said, "Boy, come here, let's talk." Come here, let's talk. Fellas, we're about out of time, but I want to get a little bit of this. We're gonna go over a little bit, Tina, on time, just because this question came back to mind that hit me. Somebody asked me this years ago, and the way that it hit me made me realize there was a whole lot of stuff I wasn't dealing with. And it's a very simple question. And I've asked that to men, and I seem to get the same response, especially on one-on-one. And it's this question right here. Are you happy?
Hmm.
And you'll watch Black men freeze.
Mm-hmm.
Because 9 times out of 10, ain't nobody ever asked you.
Right.
You know, because if we tell the truth, sometimes we just accept the fact that that's not a matter of concern for most. Are you productive? Are you provider? Are you security? Are you whatever? But are you happy?
So oftentimes in this journey of manhood, the self doesn't really get, for Black men, the self doesn't really have space created for it, you know. And so then we externalize our happiness, like my children are fed, the mortgage or rent is paid, and you know, I got my education, all of these
Guilty.
external things, but the self has to be prioritized. And my clients, my Black male clients, I would say, Pastor Jones, that is almost the thing that I hone in on the most, helping them understand that that inner child, that self, deserves a space, a safe space, in order to exist, you know. And that's really a challenge, because we're not conditioned to believe that it has a right to exist or coexist with everything else that we're responsible for. So once they actually began to identify that, yo, yeah, I have feelings, I have needs outside of the ones associated with other people or the other things that I have brought into my existence, then that's where the real personal growth and development just it it it, it it's almost like a self-healing mechanism for depression and anxiety and all of the other stressors, when an individual is able to self-validate and say, yes, I have a right to actually exist and thrive.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a wonderful question.
It sounds like, in summing up this conversation, guys, I wish I could keep y'all for another hour, but it sounds like, in summing up what you just said, Jules, is that oftentimes we as Black men lose ourselves in this quest to become what society says we ought to be. And that is the catalyst behind our mental breakdown. is that I'm trying to meet all these external things. And as you start rattling stuff off a few minutes ago, I was like taking body blows. My kids are good. My mortgage is paid. But right, I'm being a man. I can take that punch. But it still comes back to that question. Are you happy? Have you even considered your happiness? I'll get to it later. And by the time we get to it, you know, we can't do much anyway because we're worn out. Gentlemen, thank y'all so much, everybody, for being a contributor to this very hot topic. You know what? This was so good. We might have to do it again. So don't ignore my text or my email next month, because we need to talk about this some more. We need to talk about this some more. This was some great conversation. Thank y'all so much. Tina's going to take y'all backstage. I'm going to close it out, then I'm going to come back and talk to you in just a second. Wow. That was good. That was good for me. It was therapeutic to be in conversation with fellow Black men. And, you know, it's therapeutic when you realize you're not by yourself. When somebody else feels what you feel. To me, one of the most intimate things that is said about Christ in the Bible is that we have a high priest who has been touched by the feelings of our infirmity. We have a God that made himself a man so he could feel what it was like to be us, and should make it easy for us to relate to him. What just took place in these 50 minutes of conversation is relating, Black men relating and being honest, and still being able to be who we are. And everybody you saw on that screen is doing well, relatively successful in the things that they are achieving. But what's amazing, y'all, is that success doesn't take you to this place where you're above the need for mental wellness. As a matter of fact, I'd stick my neck out there and say, oftentimes, that the more successful you become as a Black man in this country, the greater the need for mental care. Because I think for many of us, it becomes incredibly disappointing when you have done everything that you think was required of you, and then you realize, I still can't get past some stigmas. We saw that take place with our 44th president, and had an incredible resume, but there were still so many challenges he faced just because of, as Jules said, the melanin in his skin. And so, brothers, I'm here to appeal to you. I hope, number one, that you will open up to the idea of getting counseling, getting therapy. And yes, you can talk to your pastor. I'm a pastor. That's good. But I'm also an advocate for people like Jules and others who have gone to school and been certified in various ways to be able to just help you walk through some things. I want to encourage you to do that. But I also want to encourage you to do what, you know, Dana and I, we still, as you can tell, as soon as we start talking about it, we remember it with great fondness. When we would huddle up, the five of us would huddle up in a dorm room and have court. Man, that was the beginning of a bond that we all know will last us for our lifetimes. We love each other. And it was in those days that we bared our chests, opened ourselves up to one another, shed some tears in front of each other. And so we knew how to protect each other. We knew what signs to look for if one of us was starting to venture off. There were many times we ran interventions. Yeah, they'd come gang up on you and pull you back from the ledge. And I love them for that. And they will always be my friends for that. And that's why I trust them with my kids. They are written into my will. They have a job to do if I leave this earth before they do, because I could be vulnerable with them. I could be real with them. I want to encourage you to nurture that, to foster that environment, brothers. Get you some real brothers that you don't lose your self-respect. They don't lose their respect for you. If I can't tell you how I really feel about something, are we friends? Are we really friends? I want you to think about that. And last but not least, are you happy? Yeah. I need you to take care of you. Make space, as Jules said, make space for self, make space for you to take care of you. That doesn't mean you got to abandon everybody else. It doesn't mean you got to walk away from your responsibilities. You have the capacity to do both. As a matter of fact, you have a need to do both. Take care of you, brother. Please. We need you. Hope to see you again next Monday as we bring you some more relevant topics, some more relevant discussion. Tune in 7 o'clock each night, Sunday through Friday, here on CYM-TV. We got a little something for you. Tomorrow's Youth Wednesday will be, this Wednesday, we're going to talk about Black history in the Bible. So if you want to see what Black people were in the Bible, come tune in with us. Thursday, we do a throwback with a sermon, and Friday, we feature one of our ministers. And so we try to give you some content every night, just so that we can just show you how much we appreciate you. I appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in again. Till next time, much love.